Better late than never, right? Hello and welcome. Apologies for the late video this week. I've been a bit busy with work, but it's better late than never, right? This week was planned to be the final high mileage week before the taper starts. However, I began the week not knowing if I'd even be able to run. As discussed in last week's video, I tripped and bashed up my knee, meaning I spent the entire weekend hobbling around, barely able to walk. Things were not looking great. Thankfully though, on Sunday the swelling began to die down, and by Monday morning the knee wasn't feeling too bad other than soreness from the wound itself. I headed out for a cautious recovery run, ready to stop immediately if there were any issues. I was pleased to find the knee actually felt pretty good while running, and in fact improved as the run went on. I ended up doing the full planned 7.5 miles, which was a pleasant surprise. The knee continued to feel good throughout the day, so I decided to head out for my afternoon recovery too. That went well too. The pace was a little slower than I'd been running recovery runs at, and the heart rate was a little elevated, but the main thing was that I was out there running. With my confidence boosted from those two positive recovery runs, I headed out for my canal run on Tuesday morning, 12 miles at easy pace, but again ready to stop if there was any sign of trouble. The knee felt good, and after some initial tightness from the scab, I basically forgot about it entirely. Amazing when you consider just a few days ago I was finding even walking uncomfortable. The pace was a little slower than I had been managing, at around 7:31 per mile pace, and the heart rate again was a bit elevated. This always seems to happen when I take a few days off. It was a little frustrating as I'd been running so well the week previous, however, at least I was out there and not stuck inside injured. The afternoon recovery was more of the same. Knee felt good, the pace and heart rate not so much. As the knee appeared to be coping fine with the resumption of full training, I decided I'd give my planned session a go, although I promised myself I'd abort if I had any issues. It was the final NAZ session of the plan, 10 by 1 mile at half marathon pace with just 1 minute recovery. Unfortunately, due to the schools going back from the summer holidays, the track wasn't available. Luckily, there's a mile-long stretch along the river that the local running club has marked up with quarter-mile markers for their Magic Mile events. Therefore, I could use that and know I was running a fairly accurate 1 mile and I wasn't at the mercy of GPS. I went into the session a little apprehensive due to the knee and the fact my paces had been a little off the past few days. The first mile came out at 6:06, so a little off the hoped for 5:57 per mile pace that I managed during the 20 by a K session a few weeks ago. However, it was a pretty windy morning and I wasn't on the track, so it wasn't terrible. The next one came in at 5:59, which was a lot better and gave me a bit of a boost. Despite this, I still wasn't feeling especially up for the session, but I just promised myself to keep ticking off 1 rep at a time and that I'd cut it short if the pace fell off. Thankfully it didn't, and I ground through the reps, ending up with an average of 6:04 per mile. Not perfect, but decent enough given the breeze and the fact I wasn't on a track. Regardless, it was still a good workout, and given where I was just a few days ago, I couldn't complain too much. My legs felt pretty decent the next day for another easy canal run. The pace was a little better at 7:25 per mile, and the heart rate was down too, although it was still a little elevated. It was a nice cool morning, which probably helped, but nonetheless it was nice to see some progress. The afternoon recovery also showed improvement. It was a bit ploddy, but the pace and heart rate were better. Friday was a return to the scene of my trip for the usual 16-mile medium long run. I was genuinely a little bit afraid approaching the curb where I tripped. However, this time I managed to scale it successfully. The pace was pretty decent on this one, 6:52 per mile, which is right around what I was producing previously, and the heart rate was in the right ballpark too. It was really pleasing to feel like I was getting back in the groove, and this continued on the afternoon recovery, which was the best of the week yet. The confidence I gained from Friday's runs was reaffirmed on Saturday when my easy Canal 11 came out at 7:18 per mile pace, right back to where I was. I felt a little tired in myself, but the legs ticked over nicely and the heart rate was right where it should be. Having successfully resumed a full week of normal training, I decided I'd attempt the session I had planned for the prior Sunday, 13 miles at marathon pace. I was a little unsure whether it was best to attempt this session or just do the planned 24-mile long run at normal long run pace. In the end, I decided with the extra rest I'd had from the enforced weekend off, it wouldn't be overdoing things. And as the session was 13 miles at marathon pace, if I didn't feel recovered enough for the final BAC session, which is 30 minutes at marathon pace, 4x5 minutes at lactate threshold, and then another 30 minutes at marathon pace, I could just cut that session down. I was able to find another race, the Chippenham Half Marathon, that thankfully still had places left, and I headed down there on Sunday morning. I ran an extended warm-up of just under 7 miles and got back to the start line just in time to swap my vest and line up for the race. After the usual slightly fast start, I settled nicely into marathon pace and just ticked off the miles. The pace varied depending on the slight undulations on the course, but I averaged 6:16 per mile pace, which is bang on. The heart rate and effort felt right, and it generally felt pretty smooth, so that was pleasing. There was a small hill in the final mile which pushed the heart rate up a little, but thankfully that was immediately followed up by a nice downhill all the way to the finish. Unfortunately, after the 13-mile marker, we had the longest 0.1 miles ever, which must have been at least 400 metres. Nonetheless, overall it was a good course and a very well organised event, and I'd definitely like to come back one day and race it at full pace. Following the race, I ran another few miles for warm down, which brought me to 22 miles at an average pace of 6:30 per mile. Not a bad morning's work. Overall, that added up to 116 miles for the week, something I couldn't have dreamed of 7 days ago. Thankfully, I seem to have been very lucky and gotten away without any serious injury to the knee. It was frustrating to miss that weekend of training, and it does mean I've missed the final 24-mile long run I always like to do. However, with all the miles I put in, it shouldn't be a massive loss. Looking at the big picture, training's gone really well so far. I haven't had to miss any sessions, and all my paces have been as fast or faster than those I was producing prior to Manchester last year when I ran 2:45.06. I've averaged just over 100 miles per week for the last 12 weeks, and it's that consistency that should set me up well for Berlin. It's taper time now, so I'll gradually ease back on the mileage, although I still have one more big BAC session on Wednesday and then a final blast out at the Worcester 10K before I wrap my legs up in cotton wool, ready for the big day on September 29th. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel to follow my journey towards the Berlin Marathon. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to cover in future videos, please leave a comment below. Cheers.